Hello, free spirits. Welcome back to another episode of the Flying Upstream podcast. Today, we are in the beautiful, pleasurable presence of Roselynn Onah. Did I pronounce that correctly? Is it Onah?
Onah is the
Nah.
correct way, but
Okay.
I receive it. It's coming. It's coming with pleasure, so I receive it.
Lovely. We are so glad to have you with us today, Rosalyn. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm so excited to be here. Thank you, Luisa. Thank you, Kristyn. Thank you, Flying Upstream family, for having me here. I'm Rosalyn. I am a mental health advocate, attorney by day, sports enthusiast, and I'm just here to share my story, get to know you guys all a little bit better. And I'm so excited to be here to spend time and be in your presence today.
We're so excited too, Rosalyn. Thanks for joining us. And I want to dive right in and get to the heart of a lot of what we're going to talk about today. So, first off, I know that you are divorced, and let's dive into that. So, what do you think it is about divorce that often pushes people to make major life changes and decisions that they might not have made otherwise?
Well, yeah, no, definitely. Thank you. I think that before I dive in there, I think it predates even my divorce making life changes. I've always been the sort of person who wanted to do the right thing and do good and do well. So I think that I've always existed in that. I had existed in that space of not understanding who I was as a person, not understanding my boundaries. And I think that just from a long time of not being in that space, the divorce was kind of like a breaking. It was a trigger because divorces are like deaths. So it was like with that dying, it's like, what else was there for me? And I had always kind of done therapy, but my divorce really forced me to look within and to figure out who I am as a person. And I realized that I was very unsure with myself. So divorce and through therapy really gave me the tools to self-reflect and understand my values and continue to grow from that standpoint of self-reflection. So yeah, divorce is like a breaking, and that's kind of what it did. It broke me open because of the death of that relationship.
I appreciate you sharing that because, as I've shared as well, I too am divorced.
Mhm.
But I was the other party in the relationship who was completely secure of who I was. I
Mhm.
knew what I wanted. And I thought that the other person did too. But what I realized is that there are so many factors and so much internal work that
Mhm.
I had been doing within myself that sometimes, if others are not doing, for example, that therapy, that questioning, who am I? And that
Mhm.
questioning, what do I really want? And not just flowing with like what society tells us we should be doing. It can be really hard to meet the other person in that space. That was in my own personal experience. And I think you are right. I love that you shared that it is a death because that's how it felt to me. It was a death of a version of myself that I
Mhm.
knew and a version of myself that I put out there without the boundaries and without the expectations. It was just like, here you go, just giving, 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 giving without any expectations that I should be receiving back too. Um, and for me, there was something that was interesting that I've kind of been digging into a lot lately. And it was, I'm Dominican American.
Mhm.
I am first generation to grow up in the United States. And I know you've shared a little bit about your Nigerian American background, but I will say for me, there was a part of me that really thought, based on my upbringing, that people would not walk into a commitment like marriage without being sure of themselves the way that I was, because
Mhm.
in my culture, that was understood. Like, it wasn't an explanation that I needed to say to someone.
Mhm.
How do you believe that your Nigerian American upbringing, or how did that impact and play a role in a lot of the big changes that you've made and experienced in your own life?
I think it's huge. It informs so much of who I am as a person in ways in which, like, I wasn't even as aware of until I started learning how to reflect and understand what my values are from therapy. So I think that even given the fact that even when I am with people from other cultures that I think are similar to me, they're just distinctions to being Nigerian American that allows me, we're intense people and we're very serious about life. We're very serious about being successful. It's really part of our culture. And I think that when you're around people that don't understand that, they can not understand that it's still coming from a good place and it's not necessarily coming from a harsh place. I just didn't understand how important it is to seek out people who are aligned with me because I've always been with my family unit. I grew up traveling a lot. We lived in a lot of different countries. So the one constant for me has always been my family. And as I lived in America and I interacted more with different people, I didn't understand how much of my internal culture I was bringing and sharing with other people in my life, and how I needed to find people. I needed to find community that understood that or was at least open to learning about my culture and learning about who I am as a person, and learning how to kind of give and take and compromise in that space. But again, I always like lean on to the fact that I needed to like build the right community. And by learning about what my values are through therapy, it allowed me to understand that I needed to seek out people that I aligned with, which is a big part of why I decided to create the community that I am creating through my own podcast, which Luisa has been on, and Kristyn is going to be on my podcast soon, hopefully. And that my podcast, At Your Best Podcast, is really a community I love the community that we're building there of women who are confident, women who are go-getters and understand their values and their boundaries. And it's just such a wonderful place for me to be and to be part of. But as you said with your question on how my culture influences, my culture is just a huge part of who I am. I love my culture. I love who I am as part of my culture as well. And I've learned to find people who align with that culture. And that's kind of what it's brought to me.
I appreciate that because I imagine that in finding your culture, there is some resilience involved. There's some hits and misses in there. And this is something you speak about on your podcast too, which is this concept of resilience.
Yeah.
And coming back from a difficult situation to try again, coming back with a positive attitude again and again and again. How do you define resilience in regards to your own life? And how would you say that it looks like for you? How has resilience represented itself for you?
Learning the skill of resilience is something that I've always been resilient, but I've had my resilience tested in so many ways since then. One of the things I did early on in life is I went to law school, but I never took the bar exam. So after my divorce, that was one place where I felt like I hadn't finished something I started, and I had to take the bar exam while I was working, while I had all kinds of life going on. So that was like a huge test of resilience for me. And that's where like I knew I was resilient, but being able to wake up early, study during my lunchtime, study in the evening, have 12 all weekend I'm studying, and sticking to that goal, having that internal discipline and failing. It didn't come easy, but I think resilience is really working through the challenge, understanding that even if there is something as difficult, I wasn't scoring well in my practice tests, but I didn't let that stop me. I understood the value of what it meant to me to finish something I started. And I found resources through my sister. I had people in my life who were support systems. I was committed to my goal. And all those tools that I learned along the way allowed me to take the bar exam, pass it in one go, and it's not the passing it in one go, because I think that even if I hadn't passed it, I would have still had the internal fortitude to keep going. But that process showed me that I can really do anything that I set my mind to, as long as it's aligned with my values. Even when I'm afraid, I was able to push through despite the fear. And I learned to look at fear more as a trigger to take action than a trigger to retreat. So those were all things that I learned through going something difficult. And I think the most important thing with resilience is that it's not you learn resilience in action. You learn resilience by doing something difficult. It's not something theoretical that you just read about and you do in abstract. So it's really taking that step despite the fear that brings upon resilience. And it's something I'm really passionate about. It's definitely the topic of the month this month. And we have a great expert, Dr. Rowe, who's a resilience expert that we're working through and talking to. And the episode with Luisa is about her story of resilience and how she got through different challenges in her life. So there are many people, not just in our lives, but I'm sure even in your listeners' lives, that if they look to, they can find stories of resilience to help them through their challenging situations as well. So, yeah.
It is so it's so fitting with what I want to talk to you about next is, you mentioned you're a sport enthusiast.
Yeah.
And when I think about sports, I always think about, athletes and like how they have to bounce back so quickly. I mean, sometimes in like seconds. And, sometimes they get to turn it around pretty
Yeah.
big, like pretty amazingly.
Yeah.
And you mentioned earlier internal fortitude. And
Mhm.
how do you think resilience and that internal fortitude that you mentioned play a role in sports? How does that like kind of all come together?
Oh wow. I mean, it's at the heart of sports. It's why I love sports. I there've been many games, for example, that I've watched recently. Actually, yesterday there was a Duke basketball game with North Carolina, and North Carolina was down, I think, by like 20 points in the third half. And they cut that down to like 3 points. North Carolina ended up losing and Duke ended up winning. But the I would say North Carolina won, because like the way in which they fought back in that moment, they could have been like, okay, we've already lost this game. We're 20 points down. It's the fourth quarter. But no, they kept fighting. They kept realizing that if they just stayed present in this moment and they just focused on the next step, there was still 10 minutes and they could score enough points to win theoretically. But it was that ability to go back to just focusing on what you have to do in this moment, not letting the emotions take over, that built that fortitude. I mean, resilience and fortitude, they're muscles. As long as we keep working the muscle, we are going to see the results of that. It may not be the result you envision. I'm sure North Carolina wanted to win this game. That may be what they wanted, but at the end of the day, just being able to fight through, they learned so much about themselves that gives them the ability to live to fight another day. And I think I just like, I love seeing sports in action. It teaches us so much about who we are. And it really gives us an arena to practice. Sports mean a lot to people. I don't want this to come out the wrong way, but it is at the end of the day just a game. And you can take those lessons and apply them to your life, which is even more important, and work at your goals and reach for the stars. It puts you in the arena, which is one of my favorite quotes of all time. Being in the arena of like just living and playing your life and living it at a high, excellent level, which I think we're all gifted with that opportunity to do. But yeah, I could talk about sports forever.
Well, first of all, I'm a UNC grad, so I gotta give a little
Oh,
shout out to UNC.
yeah. Well, it's selection Sunday's coming up, so hopefully they get in there. So we'll see.
Love that.
Mhm,
Um, and I'm curious, so you're obviously a sports fan, and I know
mhm.
you're stay up to date on a lot of sports news and such. How different is it for a sports person of any sport to
Mhm.
have that game mindset, to come
Mhm.
back when you're down and it's the third quarter and there's all sorts of emotions happening.
Mhm.
That type of scenario where there's so much pressure, you have crowds watching you, you're televised,
Mhm.
all the things that go along with that,
Mhm.
versus your average person like us, where we're just kind of living our life, but we still
Mhm.
feel that pressure. How
Mhm.
different is that mindset, or how similar, and what could we learn from people in sports?
Oh, there's so much to learn. I think that there is a lot of similarities in like you prepare for your game, you practice for your game, and in life you can prepare and practice too. One of the things that I do for myself that allows me to kind of prepare and practice is journaling. I have a journal, and I really should get paid for this, but I don't. It's called the gratitude journal, and what I love about it is it's a very easy to fill out journal. It takes less than 5 minutes, but it's a great self-reflection tool, and that is a way of mentally practicing. But there are many other methods. You can meditate, you can journal, you can be in community of people you trust that share how you are coming across to them. Those are all ways of preparing you in kind of like the off season for the game, whatever that game is for you and your life. Whether it is writing a book, whether it is just showing up at work the way you want to show up at work, so that you can get that promotion that you want to get by centering yourself as a person on a daily basis. Another thing that I do that centers me as a person, and is part of that preparation that a lot of people do in sports, is I have what I call a declaration to thrive that I read to myself every day in the morning and in the evening. And that declaration to thrive is like my mission statement for myself. It is how I want to support the people in my life, how I want to show up for the people in my life, how I want to show up for myself. And I start my day with that and I end my day with that. I also end my day with a 5 minute motivational video. Any video, I just pick it from on YouTube. And when I do that, and I'm not perfect, I don't do it every day like I would love to do. But when I do that, and when I'm doing that consistently, I am in such a positive, strong internal mindset of who I am as a person that there's nothing that comes my way that I cannot handle, that I don't feel like I can't handle, because I'm just on a high. And then exercising too. All those are part of my preparation to be who I am as a person. Exercise just gives you those endorphins as well, whatever form of exercise you choose to do. So all that are different ways in which, as individuals, you can prepare. And where sports is nice is like you're used to preparing and understanding that if you don't prepare, what you're doing excellently in practice is what you're going to do excellently when the game is on the line and you're in the fourth quarter of your life, or you're in the fourth quarter of an actual game. And one of my favorite coaches, he's a soccer coach, football, as they call it internationally. He used to be the coach of Manchester United. It's be prepared or be prepared to fail. He was such a huge preparation advocate. So it's really important in life. And there's so much you can take from sports to prepare in life too. Yeah.
That is beautiful. I love your declaration to thrive. I never heard that. That's such a beautiful way.
I did get it from someone else. So just to give credit, I can't remember his name, but yeah, no, I'm always looking for nuggets like that in life. Yeah.
Yeah, and so helpful, right? Like you said, it keeps you, kind of prepared, and like whatever life throws your way, instead of questioning, can I handle this, is just a matter of how you're prepared. You're in a positive space, and the difference in our lives, to me, the way that I see it, is not necessarily what happens to us, it's how we respond to it.
Mhm.
And when you are in a perfect, I mean, not perfect because that's
Mhm.
not a thing, but when you're in a prepared state to respond positively, I feel like it gives you the mental space to remember all of your tools that you have, remember what's in your toolbox, what you can go grab to be able to help you manage that moment to the best of your ability at that time with what you have. And I love that you share that there are so many, that there are like quotes and, this declaration to thrive that you have, because one of your episodes on
Mhm.
At Your Best podcast that I was listening to yesterday morning. You talk about this. You talk about, being surrounded by quotes and by affirmations, and how that's been a huge part of it for you. And it hit me because for me, during my own spiritual awakening, and when I first learned to really like fly upstream and just make the right decisions and just live my life based on what I felt I wanted, instead of, what society had laid out for me, I actually was in that same space where I had sticky notes all over my house, just with
Yeah.
the positive affirmations, the quotes. Can you tell me how that helps? Like a practical, like day to day, idea for our listeners. What does that look like? Because I think when people like us
Mhm.
talk about it, I think
Mhm.
sometimes it can be like, oh, because
Mhm.
they are on the other side. But
Mhm.
we're like everybody else. We just used a tool. How did that tool help you in a practical, everyday way?
Yeah, no, I think that speaking for myself, I am a work in progress, and I've made a lot of progress, but I'm always a work in progress. And I just love the work of continuing to grow who I am. So I do a lot of that. So I definitely I wouldn't want anyone to feel like I have somehow arrived and there's no work that I do. I have failures, I have challenges. I've just built a life of tools that I can fall to. Um, there are different one big tool that I have that I could share with your audience, for example, is an ebook that I recently wrote for toxic work environments, because that was a big challenge in my life, just not being able to understand how to manage a work environment in a way that allows me to thrive. I mean, one of the things with work is that it's hard sometimes to just leave an environment that you might find that is not necessarily the best for you mentally, spiritually, and all that, because they're practical realities of life. You have to like pay your bills. So you can learn how to manage it though by setting your boundaries at work, having difficult conversations with people at work. And to your question, that is a very practical way to have these tools work for you. So you can download the ebook free on my website if you are interested in that, but it's a very practical way. One of the things that I do also that is practical for me, if you look behind me, you can see two quotes. I'm surrounded by quotes as a practical tool. Another part is that I'm a person of faith. So as part of my morning, I have a morning practice that's also very useful to me. As part of that morning practice is my prayer. You can meditate, whatever practice for you works. There's so many tools. You can um build a community of people. And one of the things with building community that I have learned also that is another great tool is the idea that you have to organize the people in your life to where they fit for you. And I learned this from a book called um Higher I think Higher is Waiting. It's a Tyler Perry book. Um, and you can he organizes people as leaf people, branch people, and root people. Root people are the people who will withstand any storm in your life. You know, when it's the worst shame spiral, you've done something that, you don't want to repeat to too many people. Those are your root people, the people who I don't really like the term ride or die because I'm not dying with anybody. Uh, I am not choosing that option. So, but those are the people who are going to be there for you through the thick or thin. And then they're branch people. They may be there with you through certain storms that come in your life, through certain difficulties. And they're the leaf people who you know that, yeah, maybe those are just the people you hang out with. And I have friends that I just hang out with and we have a good time. We go to movies, concerts, whatever, sporting events. And I know that that is the extent of the relationship that I have with them. So that's another great tool that has really, really helped me because after my divorce, it wasn't just a divorce of a partner, it was a divorce of a lot of the friends because I realized that I had a lot of friends who weren't respecting my boundaries, who weren't aligned with who I am and the values that I had. And that led me also to a framework, which is a big tool for me that I have. I call it like the At Your Best framework that starts with reflection. of reflecting on who I am and understanding who I am and developing my own values for myself. And then that allows me to build community with people who I am aligned with and live as I'm living now from a space of growth where I am able to grow. I have the tools, I have the resources, I have the community around me to be kind of who I am as a person. So, yeah, a lot of tools, and that's what I love about this kind of work that I do with my podcast, is just being able to share those tools and live from those tools, more importantly.
That's so inspiring, and I
Mm.
can appreciate so much that you've taken everything you've learned and made it into your own framework that not
Yeah.
only works for you, but that can work for other people too.
Mhm.
And I'm curious, as we start to wrap up here,
Mhm.
on your journey of transformation through divorce, career shifts, personal growth, you've had to make choices that may have been unconventional or even
Mhm.
countercultural. What
Mhm.
kind of advice, as you look back on this, would you give
Mhm.
to somebody else who's just starting their own journey of flying upstream and going through changes themselves?
Yeah, no, first of all, you're not alone. There's this great community here at Flying Upstream. There's my great community. There are places you can go to feel supported. But a lot of this work is private work, you know. Um, a lot of this work is difficult work, and it's okay for things to be difficult. It's okay for things to be private, and it's introspective work. It's work that there was a lot of crying for me. There was a lot of, like, I'm telling the story in a linear way, but there was a lot of breaking and stopping and not knowing what I'm going to do and being lonely and being like thinking that I'm not going to make it. And all that is part of the journey. All that informed who I was and helped me get to the other side. There was a lesson in everything that I take that gives me the peace I have today. So I would definitely, the message would be, you're not alone, and there's community, there is help for you out here to be able to develop the tools you need to get to the point of growth and get to that other side for yourself as well. So I definitely I'm so excited for you because there is so much out there on the other side. Once you've done that work and figured out who you are, figured out what your values are, and then figured out who your community is, then you get to grow and thrive and reach for whatever goals you have for yourself. So yeah.
That's so beautiful. Well, Rosalyn, thank you so much for joining us today. This conversation has been incredible. Your journey, your resilience, the way that you've navigated transformation with intention and strength are truly inspiring. Thank you for sharing your wisdom with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. And you can catch me on my website at rosalynonnah.com. All my socials are there, so you can connect with me there.
Wonderful. And if you haven't already, to our beautiful listeners, remember to subscribe to At Your Best podcast, and subscribe to Flying Upstream podcast as well. And if you're ready to take your journey of transformation even further, remember to check us out. Check out Rosalyn's her website, all of her resources, the ebook she's mentioned, all of those beautiful tools that we've talked about today will be linked in the show notes, and in YouTube, it'll be in the description for you to stay connected with us. Um,
Yeah, that's right. So remember, choosing the road less traveled isn't always easy, but it's where the magic happens. Keep questioning, keep exploring, and keep flying upstream. Until next time.
Next time.